Hello guys and girls, and welcome to today's video. As you can see here on the screen, the topic that we're going to be talking about today is how to interview. We've spent a little bit of time talking about the fact that you are going to probably be interviewing some different people for the articles that you're going to be writing. And so today we're going to dive in a little bit deeper to discuss some strategies that you should use when you interview, the types of questions that you should ask when you interview, and even some etiquette that you should follow if you are interviewing someone for your article. I do need you to take notes today, so I would like you to start by giving your notes a header up at the top that says how to interview, and then once you have that copied down, you can go ahead and move on. All right, let's start by talking about the purpose of an interview. Why do we have to interview people if we are writing an article for a newspaper? The first reason is because when we're interviewing someone, that's going to be a first-hand account of whatever it is that we're going to be writing about. Meaning, we're going to be going straight to the source of someone who we're either writing about or someone who maybe went to an event that we're writing about. And that's going to be a better source of information than if we're just trying to pull facts out of thin air. But beyond that, we are interviewing because we are gathering facts, details, and quotes for our story. It's going to make our stories much more engaging and entertaining to read when we're able to pull in those quotes, again, from the people who either experienced the event themselves or perhaps even the person who we are writing about. It also, like I said, gives your audience information directly from the source, so we're getting that first-hand account of the event rather than trying to spread information that maybe we got through word of mouth. So again, when we are writing articles, we want to try to be as accurate and as factual as we possibly can. And one way that we can do that is by interviewing people. Please make sure that you copy what you see here on this slide, and then you can move on. There are some things that you need to do before you actually step into an interview. You certainly don't want to sit down with someone and not have prepared anything beforehand. So, some things that you need to do. Number one, do your homework. You need to know a little bit about the event or about the person that you are interviewing before you walk into the interview. So, we'll do some research before we begin writing. As an example, say you are writing about the high school marching band, about our middle school students who participate in high school marching band. You might want to know some information beforehand before interviewing one of those students, like what show are they doing this year? Maybe what instrument or what part that student plays in the marching band. You don't want to walk in not knowing anything. So you will have to do a little bit of research before. Next, you want to definitely make sure you have some questions prepared. You don't want to go in not knowing what you're going to say. And we're going to be practicing this later this week, but we want our questions to be open-ended questions. And when I say open-ended, what I mean by that is we don't want the person that we're interviewing to give us yes, no answers. And so we want to make sure that we ask questions that they can expand on their ideas. And we want to make sure that they're questions that are going to give us lots of details, not just simple yeses or nos. And finally, you want to make sure that you have organized your questions. You want to start by making the person that you're interviewing feel comfortable by asking them just some easy, simple kind of warm-up questions, because obviously it can be a little awkward and a little uncomfortable to sit down and talk to someone who you've never met before. So start with those easier questions, get them comfortable, get them talking, and then you can move to the deeper questions as you go throughout your interview. Please make sure that you copy everything that you see on this slide, and once you've done that, you can move on. All right, during the interview itself, these are some of the etiquette things that I mentioned earlier. First, please be polite and respectful and professional to the person that you are interviewing. Obviously, you are representing me, you are representing yourself, you're representing our school newspaper. And so we want to make sure that we're approaching our interviews in a professional and respectful way. A great way to do that is by simply starting by maybe introducing yourself, telling the person that you're interviewing your name, tell them why you were interviewing them, maybe give them a handshake. That's a great way to start your interview. Next, make sure you are listening carefully to what the person is saying. When we practice interviews later this week, you're going to be practicing taking notes as the person is talking, but Make sure you're not just focusing on the next thing that you want to say, but that instead you're actually listening to what they have to say and maybe even building on what they're telling you. Please make sure that you copy everything that you see on this slide, and once you've done that, you can move on. Continuing to talk about what to do during the interview, some of these things we've already touched on. You can ask follow-up questions. So you don't want to just be like a robot reading questions off of a sheet of paper. You want it to feel very conversational. So if they say something that maybe gives you an idea of a question, even if it's a question you don't have written down on your paper, it is totally okay to go off script and to ask those follow-up questions. And if they say something and you're like, oh, wait, I didn't quite get that, and you need them to repeat, you can always ask them to do that. You can also ask them to clarify things. So if they make a comment and you maybe don't fully understand, you can ask them like, hey, could you explain what you meant when you said blank? So it is totally okay to go off script and ask those follow-up questions. Also, you need to make sure you're taking notes. If you want, you can ask the person that you're interviewing if it's okay to record them. Most cell phones have recording options. Obviously, your Chromebook, you could probably find a way to record the conversation, but you do need to ask permission before you do that. So don't just pull out your phone and hit the record button. Instead, you could say something like, hey, I really want to make sure that I don't mess up any of your words. Would you be okay if I recorded our conversation? And if they say yes, then obviously feel free to record. But if not, say, okay, totally fine. And then you can just take your notes by hand. Finally, you do want to get some quotes. It's very important when we're writing our articles to make sure we don't accidentally misquote someone. So this would be one of those instances where you might have to ask them, hey, would you mind to repeat what you just said if you feel like it's something that you might want to quote in your article. And we want to make sure that we write down those words exactly as our interviewee says them. Please make sure that you copy what you see on this slide, and then you can move on. This slide has some examples of strong question starters. I'm not going to read all of them, but I do want to just remind you that we need to be asking open-ended questions. We don't want to ask questions where the person can just say yes or no. We want them to elaborate on their ideas. I am not going to tell you that you have to copy this entire slide. I would encourage you to at least write down 3 or 4 of the question stems here, but if you want to have a really good list to pull from, feel free to copy down more, but I'm going to say you have to have at least 3 or 4. And once you've copied those, you can move on. Here are some things we want to make sure we do not do, and I know a lot of these are common sense, but I do want to make sure that we touch on them. We've already mentioned the first one. We don't want to ask close-ended questions. We don't want our interviewee just saying yes or no. Again, we want them to elaborate on their ideas. We don't want to interrupt the speaker. Make sure that as they're talking, you are not interjecting your own ideas. Remember, you are there just to get their opinion, get their viewpoint, and get the facts. So it's not really your place to interject your own opinions, and you certainly don't want to stop them as they're in the middle of a thought. You want to let them continue what they have to say. You can show that you're engaged by doing things like nodding your head or taking notes, but you don't want to use your words to interrupt what the speaker is saying. Finally, this is a big one. Please do not argue with the person who you are interviewing. Remember, your job is not to challenge them. It's not to well, you are questioning them, but you're not questioning their opinions. You're there to just be a person who is listening and recording what they say. So we want to try to make sure we're understanding their perspective, not interjecting our own opinions, and certainly not arguing with them. After the interview, it's a great idea immediately after the interview to look at your notes. So as soon as you say thank you for your time, you shake their hand, you leave, look over your notes. While everything is still fresh in your head, you might be able to jot down a few things that you couldn't get on the paper during the interview. But if you do this right after, it's all going to be fresh in your mind. Also, immediately after the interview, take a highlighter and go through and highlight some of the strong quotes, things that you think you might want to make sure you mention in your article, or places where you might want to quote your interviewee directly. Again, those quotes are going to make your article much more engaging for our audience, and it's going to be great to do that again while it's all fresh in your mind. Finally, a great thing to do after your interview is to thank the person. You should thank them while they're right there in front of you, again, with a handshake. Thank you for your time. But you could even follow up with like a card in the mail or an email, just again, thanking that person for taking time to talk to you. That's great because it shows respect, but it's also going to build courtesy and it's going to build trust. So if you ever needed to interview that person again, they're obviously going to be more willing to talk to you if they had a good experience the first time and if they felt like their time was valued. Please make sure that you copy everything that you see on this slide. And once you've done that, that's actually it for our notes today. It was pretty quick and easy. I do want to see your notes when you're finished. And so once you show those to me, you're done for the day.